Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us, and welcome once again to a Thursday teissTalk, the highlight of your week. It's the last thing you do before a Friday, let's face it. Today, we're going to be talking API security. It's the topic that just keeps on giving because so many of us just don't really understand it. Before we start, though, a few announcements. Firstly, if you are watching us on LinkedIn, that does mean that whilst we welcome you with open arms, you will not be able to ask any questions. And because you won't be able to ask any questions, you won't be able to win a teissTalk mug, which I don't have with me today because I'm traveling today and I don't always carry it with me. But if you can imagine a mug with teissTalk on it, that's what you could be winning. They become collector's items. What can I say? So if you're watching us on LinkedIn, please do wander over to teiss.co.uk/teissTalk, log in. You'll be able to join us there. For those of you who are joining us natively, please do pop a question into the chat, which is around about there, I think. And the best question, the question that makes us laugh, the question that makes us sweat, or the question that I just randomly select, the asker of said question will win a teissTalk mug. So let's move on, shall we? So without further ado, can I invite onto the stage, please, Tiago, Anne, and Menachem?
Hello, Tom. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Tiago. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
Indeed. Oh, it is for us as well. And hello, Anne.
Hello. Happy to be
And
here and hope everyone is having a great day.
yes, well, it's not raining, so yes, we are. And hello, Menachem.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. First time and really excited.
Yeah, fantastic. And Menachem, you are our sponsor this week. So, firstly, thank you for the tea, coffee, and biscuits. That's greatly appreciated. And yes, we will be learning, I'm sure, a lot more about API security, given who you work for, Akamai. So let's move on. And in a slight departure from the norm, we're not going to be going to an article a news item of the week. We're actually going to go to a report. It's quite a large report, so I do not expect everybody watching to read everything. It's what, 50 odd pages. However, I will say pages 4 and 5. Excuse me, they do have some very interesting stats. Things like 33% is the percentage of increase in global web attacks year over year. Now, that's quite high, isn't it? I mean, that's if a sales organization got a 33% increase year on year increase in sales, they'd be extraordinarily happy. So, are we seeing some very happy criminals as a result of this increase in global web attacks?
I would say so. I think we look at what's going on across the world from both the geopolitical or even from the economical point of view, where people are using state-sponsored attackers to actually gather information or data from companies out there or organizations. Definitely, I'm sure there's plenty of very happy attackers out there where the levels of data exfiltration are going through the roof. I'm sure Menachem and Anne will share the same view, and even with some numbers to back it up.
For sure. And actually, I'm seeing it in a couple of different sectors since I do work across sectors as a VC. So I've seen this on the medical device side, and that's not where you want to see that happen a lot. And also on the financial systems, the accounting side, healthcare is fraught with issues and APIs that unfortunately are a little too wide open. And so the exfiltration of data is something that is huge. And one of the things that has been noticed over the last couple of like really big data breaches is that's the entry point. It may not be how they exfiltrate the database, but it's how they get in at first, and then they're able to take all the information out and put on the dark web.
But this
So
is
something we all have to pay attention to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But this isn't this 33% increase, and there's plenty of other stats there. I don't want to just pick on this one, but that, you know, 1/3 increase, which one is massive. It's not just down to API security. I mean, it's almost like a state of the globe at the moment. You know, attacks are massively on the rise. Would that be a fair thing to say, Melikim?
Definitely, yes. First of all, as every security practitioner, your goal is actually to reduce the number of the attacks that happening and then reduce the number of attacks that you see, because first of all, of course, exposure is, technology is evolving, exposure is also getting bigger all the time, and you might expect that things actually will go down, but it's actually other way around. We just see that APIs as an entry point and also as acceleration point, as Anne mentioned before. It's definitely something that a lot of companies didn't think about a couple of years ago, but now APIs becoming one of the main ways where threat actors and attackers are leveraging to exfiltrate their data. They might attack the companies through different versions or different forms, but to get the data or to communicate with the command control and other channels that they have, they will leverage APIs. And definitely what we see in companies all the time, we see API just, getting bigger and bigger. Like the number of the API that companies are developing are, I will say, just going up exponential, and only then companies realize that maybe they don't know how many APIs they have, who are actually using the APIs, what permissions they have, all the APIs, like a lot of challenges happening with the API. So the 33%, it's definitely something that you need to take a look at.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to pick up on one of these blue boxes here, saying 30% of the growth in security alerts related to the MITRE security framework. Now, you know, absolutely not wishing to move into political grounds, but the whole sort of MITRE framework, the CVE environment, etc., was thrown into something of a little bit of chaos a few months ago, as we well know. Funding was potentially withdrawn for it. We may end up with multiple single source of truths when it comes to vulnerabilities and frameworks like this, in moving forward. So this is something that attackers are going to be just taken advantage of massively, right?
Oh.
If we're seeing this increase when this environment is stable, when the environment becomes more questionable or not a single source of truth, etc., it's going to become even more of an issue, isn't it?
I don't think so, and for a simple reason. This is something that is not really new, is it? Because we have seen this before, for example, with China not allowing any new 0 days to be publicized out there. So if they found it in China, they'll weaponize it. They will not give it to the market to fix. So, and that happened for the last 4.5, 5 years at least. Luckily, and to your point, indeed, the US are backing down and making more difficult for us to use certain frameworks or having access to the same information. But the EU is stepping up and saying, okay, we will provide this. If I recall properly, was just 2 weeks ago, where the new framework and the replacement for both the NVD and the CVE database from the United States is going to be replicated and made open source and available to everyone in Europe. So unfortunately, yes, we are going for a balkanization of cybersecurity. Instead of everyone working together against the bad guys, we just forget that the bad guys sometimes are also the good guys, and that no two good guys are the bad guys. And it's a hell of a mess right now with all the geopolitics map across. But I don't think, and hopefully I am right, that we will suffer much from those divisions, but there will be differences for sure that we'll need to navigate.
If I can jump in for a second, this 33% and even the other 30% growth compared to the MITRE framework, I actually think might be understated. So Tiago's saying it's about right, and I think it's understated. And part of the reason is there's a clear difficulty in sharing information. And there's also many times where companies are just not willing to put their hands up and say, I've been breached, or I've been attacked, or I've had some kind of data exfil and I can't put a label on it yet. And so it may actually be higher than this as we look forward. And the real question becomes for companies, do you even know that something happened? And that's why I say a little bit higher. So I'm working with, a whole set of smaller to medium-sized businesses. They're not quite sure what to look for. So I'm fairly certain that there's more data that's been exfiltrated that they just don't realize. So as we look at these statistics, let's take that into consideration. The really big companies are part of all this network and they do share information. The smaller the company, the less you know. But guess where a lot of your problems are? Third parties, fourth parties, fifth parties. So you really have to take that into consideration.
Mm.
Or even clients, if anything, from the seller point of view. Unfortunately, I've been in a position where clients would abuse your APIs to take the data, so then later on they don't need to renew the contract with you because literally they already had all the data that they wanted from you. So there is not just the bad guys. The bad guys actually sometimes can also be your clients, but that's a whole different conversation about the abuse that is done not just by malicious threat actors, but also for very resourceful and ingenious clients.
Yeah. So I want to move on now to the panel proper. We spent a good 10 minutes on this. So ordinarily, as any regular viewer of this show will know, I charge £1 to the first person to mention AI because we all got a bit bored of it. But I think it's actually very relevant now. And the reason I say that is API security, and we're talking about refining your API security strategy to protect against AI-driven attacks. But API security has become much more of a hot topic now. And I think, potentially the reason for that is because AI is making it easier to take advantage of either poorly coded, API environments or whatever. So, Menachem, from your perspective, and also from the report, and from your perspective of Akamai, how badly has AI affected API security?
That's a great question that I will say a lot of people asking today is, first of all, why API security become a hot topic, first of all, even before the concept of AI, because if you think about APIs, it's not something new to the industry. Like APIs been here for the last 15, 20 years, REST API and other type of APIs, and it's been Progress, GraphQL, et cetera, et cetera. Attacks against APIs also exist. But over the last couple of years, from the moment generative AI been introduced to the industry, the number of APIs actually been growing so much. Like Gartner released a report last year that says that 30% of the growth of APIs actually will come from generative AI tools. If you think about how all of those generative AI tools are built, they're built based a lot on APIs. It can be like MCP servers, end-to-end, A2A. There are a lot of terms and ways and concepts how you talk about it. But at the end of the day, they built a system where others can connect to that, do other things. But at the same time, threat actors saying, oh, so there is like a generative AI tool that can sync for me. Maybe it can also generate some attacks. So they are leveraging those tools today to speed up the way they are conducting attacks. They are leveraging those tools all the time to see if they can scale up their ways of doing social engineering, the way of going sifting the data, looking at a lot of information, and they will try to leverage those tools and systems to try and do much more all the time. And at the end of the day, what we see that happening is that threat actors actually trying to leverage a different kind of tools from the legitimate generative AI tools that everyone familiar with, to what known as the dark LLM versions of those tools, which usually served in the dark web, or even like in other platforms like Telegram and other platform where you can interact with some bots that will generate and do some activities for you that you might not get from the regular generative AI solution. So definitely we see threat actors speeding up their attacks using those tools and also the usage. And that's why it's also creating more APIs in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just that. For example, you have now tools that you don't have 5 or 10 or 15 years ago with the APIs that can completely automate workflows that allow you, even if you're not an experienced coder, to query and thousands of APIs per second and retrieve data on the APIs that you find open. So that would allow you to literally exfiltrate data, even if you're not that technical person, even as we would call a script kiddie, would be able to use those tools, or someone that is not adverse in API languages or even program that can literally put all this together, that they were using a no code editor to retrieve data from and search and retrieve for data across out there. And everything, all today, everything is API based. Even GPUs nowadays have APIs. So it's not just the big things in the internet, but from the IoT point of view, and others, as Anne was pointing out, in the pharmaceutical or even on the medical sectors, everything today have an API. Your fridge most likely might have an API. So your cameras will definitely, the security cameras in your house will have an API, or even in your baby monitor. So the potential is just there. Things are not designed to be secure, regardless of using web applications or APIs.
So there's a very relevant question from Charles D'Souza. Thank you, Charles. That touches on just this. And the question is, what's the aha moment for you or your team when you realize it's an AI on the other end, not just some script kiddie? Can you share an example of an AI-powered API attack that really threw you? I know that's putting the three of you on the spot. If you wish to decline, that's not a problem. But it's true. How would you even understand if it was an API versus just somebody with some scripts?
Usually, I think speed rate will be one of those. So, and I've not in the current company, but in previous companies, I have experience where literally, because there was no rate limit on the amount of information being queried and retrieved, that we fully understand that was some kind of automation. I could never understand that. It was from a client side, so this was not an attack. Again, this was an abusive client that literally connected and literally tried to siphon all the data that they could in the shortest period of time while they had access, because they only paid for 3 months of the service.
But that's more automation than AI, right?
I don't know. I don't know what they used on the other side, but what was doing was very intelligent. So it was not just retrieving the data, all a simple just, okay, retrieve all. They were looking and searching for specific things.
Right.
And that's what I think that the machine learning was involved, because it would be very difficult for a human to switch between parameters to retrieve that data.
Yeah.
Well, I've actually seen very recent use of a combination of AI with actually some APIs as part of social engineering. So because every single message is different and they can come at you so quickly, it's very hard for your traditional security tools to understand that this is malicious. And so the way that we found out, and I can't tell you which customer it was, but it was one of my customers, where it just didn't feel right. And so it took a few of us to actually dive into it and say, hey, there are too many, it's too fast, and they are too similar, but they are not the same. And so as we moved forward, we were able to discover that this was really AI driven as opposed to a script kiddie, which could not have come at us that quickly with that many changes as part of the social engineering message. And so my takeaway for that was the traditional tools either have to adapt or change, or we have to start looking at a different set of tools with some different base assumptions.
Yeah.
Or go to the fundamentals, which is another point, but we will get there. We'll get there.
One of the examples that I personally had experienced recently, we have something called like a workshop where like we talk to someone who wants to experience like API security related attacks. We built like an closed sandbox environment where they can sit down for 4 or 5 hours and experiment with the environment. It's based on like an open source tools called like Vampy and Crappy, which is a well-known open source tools in the API security world. And during that workshop, what we do with the audience is teach them about API security and how attacks works and use cases, et cetera, like BOLA, broken object level authorization, and other type of attacks. Now, usually what we do, we come into the room and we tell them, now let's do attack number 1, let's do attack number 2, attack number 3. And recently, we said, can we take generative AI tools and automate some of the attacks, right? And then it's closed lab, it's everything fine. And we were like amazed by what we saw, by the ability, like what Thiago said, like you don't need to know about that industry. You don't need to know about the technology. You don't need to know everything about that code even to at least try some of kind of attacks. And maybe some of that will stick, some of that will actually work. And you can automate those things using those products. And that's like was really, really interesting. And the last thing I will say, a few days ago, the Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, he basically published a tweet that says that using an automation and generative AI tools, they actually found 0-day in one of their product and solution, fully automated, like no human code reading. It's like 100% automation. They found a 0-day. And that's like, a groundbreaking like in the industry today, where a lot of companies are moving into the direction. So definitely we will see these things evolve much faster.
So when it comes to like emerging technologies, so AI being one of the obvious ones, but we've also got things like IoT, which is constantly evolving, the different platforms and frameworks there, machine learning, etc. How is this going to impact API security, except just making it much harder?
How long do you have, Tom?
Sorry, say again.
Sorry, no, go on. I was asking, how long do you have? But I'll let
about 20 minutes, actually. So
okay, fair enough. I'll let Anne go first.
I was going to say, I think it's an opportunity, and the reason I call it an opportunity is we can now rethink how to deal with it, how to consider it, and what an API actually means. And in many ways, this is full circle. If you think about the advent of APIs 30 years ago, this was groundbreaking. It's like, wow, systems can talk to each other and connect to each other.
yeah,
Great. Now we fast forward, it's just happening at lightning speed. And so it's something for us to rethink how we are dealing with it. And AI should become our friend, not our foe, in helping us to secure these whole set of APIs. I mean, we are sort of in the Wild West again. This is another tech curve, and the API tech curve is upon us. But if we don't do something about it, it can create massive chaos everywhere and data exfiltration left, right, and center. But if we start to think about why is it that we want to connect everything all the time, and start to put some boundaries or some checks and balances, then we have opportunities.
Because wouldn't it be right to say at the moment, it's a 30-year-old technology, as you say, but at the moment it's a little bit of a black box in the sense that people, you ask companies, what APIs have you got? What do they connect to? What data is transferred over? They go, I don't know. We just got API stuff. We do it with APIs, and this is an opportunity to leverage things like AI to really highlight the challenges that they have with their current API strategy.
Yes, and even find which APIs exist, because that's one of the foundational issues is we protect the things we know about. In the API world, a lot of the time, customers don't even know what they're doing. They don't know what they have as APIs, and they don't know if their third-party or their fourth-party vendors have opened APIs that they may not be aware of that are also connecting. And your background sort of says it. This is it's points and times, but everything is connected. And when you start thinking about it that way, you really have to understand what you're sharing, why you're sharing, and what's the advantage of being out on the web. Like,
Yeah,
we
not
want to
just
be there. We want to be in that direction, but we also have to pay attention to what it means.
And at the same time, we need to remind ourselves it's not just direct attacks to exfiltrate data. More often than not, of course, you'll go for your business partners or the partners of your target that have a lower security or have exposed APIs to use those to attack. If you think about it, for example, if I want to attack a payment gateway, I will not go directly to the payment gateway. It's almost like trying to attack Fort Knox in the broad daylight, just showing up there, hey, give me all your gold. But I would go for example, the transport company, because those have a lesser potentially lesser protection that they would have at the front door. So again, I can use an API to attack other APIs that are part of the ecosystem, as long as I know what are the flows of data in there. And those are somewhat easy to understand, because we need to facilitate certain information out there, because regulation. I do not share Anne's optimism. I think if the regulators do not step in, yeah, well, we will continue to have the same problems that we have with normal web application or even infrastructure that still plague the world of InfoSec nowadays.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and one more thing to add on that. When we think about APIs, a lot of people think about APIs as what, for example, what Tiago mentioned, right? They have like a third-party APIs, but APIs are actually everywhere in every company, and it's actually start from even the code level. So it's not just the API that like in the runtime that you already developed, deployed, in use, but a lot of times what we see that APIs also starting really early in the process, like developers creating the APIs, they testing the APIs, everything test, and only then in production, and only then it goes to the third-party environments. So like the whole flow of the APIs everywhere, as Anne mentioned before, I mean, she's definitely 100% right. Even when you have some APIs, you don't know how many APIs you have. You don't know where all of your APIs. And over the years, as we talked before, also APIs and API security, it's not something new. And companies that have been out there for the last 10, 15, 20 years, they probably have some legacy APIs that they forget about, or APIs that they cannot stop or cannot disable. And there are really, really challenges that they might have with all of those APIs. So at the end of the day, right, you definitely need to have like a holistic view of, from the moment you even think about developing an API, to test that API from a vulnerability perspective, to understand what you have, who is using that, and then you can talk about how you protect against that and the rest of the activity. So it's like a holistic view. And the last thing I will say, another interesting aspect that we see happening over the last 5 years is a responsibility of who owns the API security.
Yeah.
Like 5 to 10 years ago, the security teams said, API, that's not us. It's like the developers. It's their own problem. It's not our problem. Like, we will prevent against malware. We will prevent against ransomware, right? We will prevent like endpoint security, not endpoint security in the terms of API, but endpoint security in the terms of computer, like an endpoint computer. And when they heard API term like 5 to 6, 7 years, they were like, it's not our responsibility. It's like someone else. But that change actually already happening over the last 2 to 3 years, where responsibility for the API security actually shifting to the security teams, which create a great opportunity, first of all, for the security team to work more closely with the R&D, closely with other groups and teams, and it's require different also mindsets and knowledge that companies are going through today. So it's like a whole change from like understanding the API you have to who owns that and who responsible for that on the day-to-day basis.
So related to your earlier point there, Menachem, Mo Singh has written, checks and balances, yes, but how do you prove your AI-driven, AI-checked APIs are not accidentally leaking sensitive data or introducing bias?
Yes, great. So that's a great question. Maybe I will jump here, and then I'm sure that Tiago and Anne also has a lot to share here. But it's actually what Tiago said. going back to the basics. You need to get visibility into your AI activities in your organization, right? You cannot protect against data filtration through AI tools if you don't know who is using AI tools in your company, where AI is in your organization. So you need to start from there. I'm plugging Akamai here. We have a solution for that from an API perspective, from a WAF, from many solutions. By the end of the day, you have traffic, right? Every company they have traffic, and the AI use traffic, right? Still generative AI, but they still have some traffic. So if you look at the traffic, you can still easily extract and get the understanding of what do you have, who is using AI tools, who is accessing to those tools. And after you do that, you move to the second stage, which is basically you put something like firewall for AI, for example, like this kind of stuff that can understand the context, can understand what is actually going through or from your organization, that you can protect against them. So you definitely need to bring all of that perspective.
Or a slightly different approach. So for example, I can talk about this because it's something that we recently released to the market, which is what we call cognitive CD, where we use machine learning to vectorize the data from the content of the user, is actually create one pool of machine learning specifically for the user, where the data that we vectorize is the data that the user have access to, no more and no less. So there is no pollution from the outside, there is no pollution from the machine learning, so we cannot introduce the bias, is only the data that the user have. And because we have very specific clients across government, defense, and critical infrastructure, this is a must. We could just pick up any machine learning system from all the major vendors out there, plug it in, but we did a risk assessment with our clients, and no, that will not be good enough because of all the problems that Menachem just kindly highlighted. They're not good enough, and that's the reality. So we actually went the extra mile and designed a system that, from our perspective, is what allows our clients to fully control the data that each of the users will have access. So that will be my perspective to Mo about not leaking sensitive data or introducing bias. Is you need on a person by person almost, or at least at a group of persons that have the same role-based access controls in place, or the access to the same data, to have access only to that. And that's the principles of RBAC 101. So there is no secret sauce around this. Is again going back to the fundamentals, not the basics, because if there were basics, all of us will be out of a job. But I like to think that they are the fundamentals when it comes to information security in here.
So let me do a reality check then on both of you. Completely agree with what both Tiago and Menachem have said. But now I'm a practitioner in a real company. I have possibly visibility on 60 to 70% of what's actually happening. You know, if I'm really, really lucky, maybe I get it up to 90. Wow. But then how do I, as a practitioner, actually make sure that the APIs aren't leaking or aren't introducing bias? And to do that, I actually have to go all the way back to how was the API written? How was it coded at the very beginning? What were the developer's assumption? Did the developer actually introduce a backdoor or introduce bias? Oh, and that's just one API. Now I've taken data from all these sources across my organization, and I've said to my Gen AI engine, go tell me what's going on, or create a model based on the data that I have within this corporation using these 4 parameters. Great, but those 4 parameters are only a little part of what may or may not be coded. So the reality of what we are facing is a big bowl of spaghetti. And so that bowl of spaghetti, the question is, do you twirl it with a fork or do you cut it up to eat it?
I would not call it spaghetti. I would think will be a massive pile of manure or proto-manure, as you would like to call it. I do agree with you. On a good day, if you have visibility of 40 to 50% of your APIs, you'd be lucky. And it definitely, the quality of the data that we input will be also the result of the output. So quality of the data is one of the most important things that people that are using machine learning need to consider. But also, what are the models that they're using and what is their risk appetite? Again, what we developed was because there was a really big part of the population in our clients that demanded this. So for some people, using, I don't know, OpenAI or Gemini or Copilot or whatever it is fine to them and gives them exactly what they want. If you're doing analysis on certain things, would you use any of those models? Potentially no, because we all know by now that they are biased, and the leaking of data is as simple sometimes as sending an email, as we recently saw. Yeah, as you say, opportunities will keep the world spinning, and the reality is more and more that will be there. If you do the fundamentals, great. If you don't do the fundamentals, then Menachem and his team will be there to help you, or any other company that works on the spectrum. So again, the world keeps on spinning, the data will keep on leaking.
So in the last few minutes, I just want to move on to what does good look like? Where do we move to a more mature API security posture, and where is it going to go in the future?
I think threat modeling is one of those things that needs to be there from the designer of the API to the implementation. Again, as Anne kindly pointed out, and so did Menachem, if you don't know what you are securing, you cannot secure. So the call out to everyone out there is talk to your teams, make them your friends, and please make sure that you have a chat with the security team even before you go to market or even before you start programming anything, because there are a lot of things that you need to consider, from data privacy to data transfers, from data sovereignty to contractual requirements with the clients. If you don't know all these things, you cannot properly develop an API or any system that will be consistent and will not bring you into trouble. Then goes the part, and when you put these things in place, even if you don't know much about APIs, there's software out there that can be used, from open source to closed source software. You have a good offer, I like to think, and I do have some knowledge about the API market and API management market about this, that you'd be able to properly manage what you expose out there. So again, even if you're not a good developer, you can control what is there. But if you don't talk, and if you keep things on silos, yes, that's not going to happen. But that's not just with APIs. That's again the fundamentals of InfoSec 101, regardless of talking about APIs or web applications out there.
Menachem, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I want to comment on a comment, but definitely let's talk also about the topic that you just mentioned. When we think about APIs, and I will say, good looks like it's a great question. Every company and organization has different needs, but I, have conversation with a lot of CISOs and a lot of companies, and after sitting for a coffee for a couple of hours, they have one simple question, like, okay, where should I start? I understand that API security is important. Now, okay, I know that visibility it's a problem. Data leakage is a problem. I don't know it's like. They're really confused what they should do and where they should start. And usually my guidance for them will be really simple. First of all, ask yourself if you have any regulation in your industry, and if that regulation require any specific API security solution in place, right? For example, if you have DORA, if you have PCI DSS, if you have GDPR, if you have ISO 27001, like each of them has different flavors and requirements for API security. So if you have that, of course, make sure that you are, using and solving the regulation that require. In addition to that, also take OWASP API Top 10 and just go through each of them and make sure that your company has the right protection against that. If you solve those two, you will be like on top of like also the 1% of the companies in the industry already, where you protect against all the OWASP API Top 10, you solve all the regulation, we're in a much, much better position compared to many other companies. And it will be a little bit more challenging for threat actors and attackers to actually attack your company and make that happen.
Yeah.
So let me take the business angle on this, because we've had two excellent technology-oriented answers. Now, as a business person, they don't know what the APIs do. They may not even know what the systems are. So if you can answer the question, what is the most important data for your business? Then you can start peeling the onion around the APIs that help that system. So if, for example, I don't know, you're a law firm. So what is the most important data that the law firm has? It's probably your customer data. Okay, now peel the onion on your customer data. Which part of customer data? If you're in an active trial, maybe that's the most important for that period of time. And so now start looking at what data and what APIs are touching those systems, and how does that data manifest? And so, yes, it's back to one of the original concepts, which is you can really only protect what you know and put the controls in place. But to discover what you don't know, sometimes you have to ask the business questions and just peel the different layers of the onion to really understand what is the most important and what's at the core of all of this. And don't get me wrong, I love Gen AI. It's making my job a lot faster. It's actually honing in on the correct data very quickly, but that's because I can understand the environment. For a lot of companies, they're not even there yet. So ask those fundamental questions, then you can get into API security.
Brilliant. I'm going to draw to a close there. I'm going to ask you the same question I ask every week, or every show that we do. You've all got 10 seconds each, because I told you get your second win just as we reach the end there. But the question is, what should our audience do when they get to their desks in the morning? Tiago, I'm going to start with you.
I think I already said it's just ask the business to work with you before they release any APIs. I think that's the most important part, is be visibility. The rest will come after. And going back to Menachem point, if you don't know what you're protecting, then you have a problem. But you definitely need to know what you're protecting, and don't create more technical depth, and then starting doing things like threat modeling across all parts of the business, from the business needs to law and regulation, or certification requirements, data privacy, data sovereignty, and so forth. That's the starting point.
Thank you. Anne?
If you get to your desk in the morning, ask a lot of questions. Start asking questions. Don't expect the business to actually come to you and ask for your help until you've sort of put yourself out there. So understand what's most important for them, understand what it's connected to, and then start understanding what the APIs are doing. And don't assume that they're all internal or all external. They are everywhere. And there are likely 3 to 4 times more APIs than you may think are actually in existence in your company. And I could be wrong. It could be 10 times or 10x.
Excellent. Thank you. And finally, Menachem.
Don't be afraid to solve the API security problem, but cut it into small pieces. Don't try to solve everything from day one, and don't scare the business. Because a lot of times we see security practitioners understand that they need to solve the API security problem, and they will show really complex long-term solution for the business, and it's too complex and too scary. Start small and then solve the right solutions and the right problems.
Brilliant. Thank you. So just two things remain. Firstly, the winner of the mug. I'm going to award it to the person that made Tiago make an interesting sound when it was read out. So that goes to Mo Singh. I've not heard a sound like that come from Tiago before, so you obviously hit a nerve. So Mo Singh, congratulations on your mug. Secondly, our next show is next week, 24th of July 4 p.m. as usual, Advancing Compliance Maturity in an Age of DORA and NIST 2. That's DORA, all capitals, nothing to do with the Explorer. And all that remains of me now is to thank our panel members. So, Tiago, thank you.
Thank you, Tom, as usual.
Thank you. And Anne, thank you.
My pleasure. Great conversation today.
And Menachem, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And for all of you watching, stay secure, my friends.